Hey everyone, it's your friend and colleague Jesse Green here, and you're listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast. It's terrific, as always, to have your company for another episode of the show. Now, dentistry, like every other business on the planet, is changing, and it's changing rapidly. We're seeing disruptive forces coming into lots of industries, and dentistry cannot and will not be immune to that. So today I'm joined by David Avrin, who's coming to talk to us a bit about customer expectations, changing technologies, being ridiculously easy to do business with, and a whole lot more. David, welcome to the program. Good to have you, my friend.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me. We are on the other side of the planet. I'm just south of Denver, Colorado. You're in Australia, and it's pretty amazing. And I think it echoes some of the things that we're going to talk about in terms of changing patient or customer expectations. Think about what we're doing right now 20 years ago. For our parents' generation, this is magic. It's magic, right? For us, it's Monday or Tuesday.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, right? Tuesday for me, Monday for you. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're talking real time. And it's all of these changes are changing customer expectations as well.
It's really interesting. We were talking off air just 5 minutes ago about dial-up phones and how to confuse younger people with a dial-up phone.
Right.
And I don't mean to be cruel, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like that was so long ago to me. It doesn't feel like a huge time has elapsed. So the rate of progress, the rate of change seems to be increasing to me. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about the rate of change.
Well, it is. And we run the risk of sounding like those old people who go, these damn kids, and get off my lawn, right? But it is. And everything's accelerating. But what it's also is creating a real challenge for those of us in business across a lot of industry. In that for the first time, we're serving 4 or 5 generations at the same time, and their expectations, their preferences for how they connect, right, and share or communicate or pay is across the board. And so for the patients and their families and the ones that we have who are in their 70s or 80s are very different than that emerging generation in their teens and early 20s, how they want to communicate, their comfort level with technology, even in terms of scheduling appointments, or the technology that you might have within the practice or within the office. And there will come a time in the next decade or two where everybody will be some measure of a technology native. Today, it's not. We're in a very difficult time for anyone in business trying to serve multiple generations with very different preferences and expectations for how they engage.
It's really interesting to talk about that because I think that's actually a really good point. And it's probably a point that a lot of us don't really think about is the segmentation of your patient base, the segmentation of your audience. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you a little bit of that because one of the things we hear about is standardization. How do we systemize? You hear the systemized businesses are really successful, and of course they are, right?
Right.
But how do you kind of then create a level of consistency when you have this generational melting pot, and how do you create consistent experiences that everyone seems to like?
Well, there's two sides of this coin, because you're right, from a business perspective, some measure of predictability of revenue and cash flow has to come from we can't make it up every time, right? But that's an internal process, mindset, and practice. The other side of the coin is customer expectations and choices. So while internally we've got processes that we can train that can drive some measure of consistency and predictability, externally we are in an age where we actually have to broaden the options that are available for our patients. Not just here's how dentistry is done. From a practical or practice and a medical perspective, we're all keeping up with the times, right? But in terms of how we're running the business and how our patients and customers are engaging with us, has to be broadened, because sort of going back to the multi-generational thing, we know within dental practices, lifetime value of a patient and their family can be 6 figures or more, right? Within that family structure is not only mom and dad, maybe grandparents and kids, but there's also the next generation as well, right? When we can really capture them, do great service, multi-generational. Once again, their expectations are different across the board. And so even their expectations for some measure of flexibility, right? Simplicity of process, maybe digital or otherwise, that drives retention. That drives onboarding, attracting and retaining those patients, those customers and their families. And so it's not just being good at what we do, because that's the entry fee, right? It's no longer a differentiator. And I want to talk more about that too in terms of quality. But how it is to do business with you plays a really large role in how happy your patient customers are and how susceptible they are to marketing efforts from your competitors.
I think that's a really interesting point. You mentioned one of my favorite topics in the world, which is customer retention, and I wrote a book on patient retention some time ago. I wanted to dial in though, because you spoke about changing expectations. I think this is a really interesting point. And as you say, there'll be differences across the generations. But if we were to look into the future, 5 years, I sometimes wonder if it's possible to look beyond 5 years these days, but because everything is changing. 5 years ago, we didn't know about ChatGPT. So I wanted to ask you, if we were to look at where you see expectations going, are the expectations becoming heightened? Are they still the same level of height, but just different? Are customers expecting more or just expecting different?
Oh, I think it's changing tremendously. They're expecting a lot more. And what's interesting, and I speak around the world to a variety of different industries. One of the things that we talk about is that historically, we've always had to be one of the best in our industry to command a higher fee, right? To be very successful. Today, for the first time ever, we are being compared to industries that have nothing to do with what we do.
Yeah.
We're being compared to Uber and Amazon and just simplicity of process, right? Or we're trying to figure out, even when it comes to filling out forms, how easy, how arduous is that process? And this is a true story. And people always say, well, if it just happened to me. Well, it literally did 3 days ago. I had to get a new crown. I have a temporary in right now. And it was a new practice, but my son was at that practice and I had somebody I was working with. So anyway, I changed. The onboarding process, I will tell you, Dr. Green, was one of the most annoying, arduous processes I have ever been through. It was like incredibly frustrating in that it's probably 9-10 pages and they're asking me the most ridiculous things. And then of course, there isn't even an option when you're signing up just for the initial consult, because I had huge sensitivity in my teeth. And it's the only option you had was to come in for an exam and a cleaning and all these. I don't need all those things, but it was all set up to serve their purposes. And I understand it, right? We all have to make a living. The things they were asking about every surgery I've ever had, every medication I've ever taken, I got halfway through, and I'm dead serious because I can be a bit of a challenge. Or as my 26-year-old daughter would say, have you met my dad? So I go into the office. This is just 3 days ago. I go into the office. I got halfway through. It took me, I was probably 25 minutes late because I just couldn't fill everything out. It was so much. And I finally walked up, handed the iPad back to him, and I said, I'm done. And she says, did you ever? I said, I didn't fill out the rest, but here's my insurance. Here's everything else. I don't want to do the rest of it. I don't have any more time. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I tried to make a joke about it. It's like, I feel like I'm on chapter 19 of a novel that I never agreed to read. And she laughed. She said, oh yeah, don't worry about all that. But I didn't know they had the option of not. The expectations are changing, and the expectations today, it's not about quality. We assume quality. Expectations are about simplicity and speed and choices and convenience. That's what they're looking for.
It's really interesting that you come back to that questionnaire that you filled out, and I know it would have been arduous. And the dentist in me is going, in me is going, oh, there's a reason they would have asked some of those questions. And I get that, right? And the practicing safely and all those sorts of things.
However, my job is to reflect the customer's perspective, and so that's the role I'm playing here.
Correct, right. Yeah. But I think what would have been simpler and perhaps a little less friction for you would have been to say, you're coming in for this particular situation, obviously the crown or the cracked tooth or whatever the situation was. Here's the basic information we need to be able to attend to that particular problem in this particular moment. After we've attended to this particular problem, we'll get you back for your examination, your cleaning, and then we'll need this gamut of information. And that might have been able to be delivered in a more perhaps acceptable manner for you.
Yeah. But here, let me ask you a question. This is for all of your listeners or viewers as well. When was some of the work that I do with organizations in terms of let's go back and revisit our contracts and our onboarding process, because oftentimes they just sort of grow organically over time because, we're going to add this, whatever. When was the last time that you did a review, a process review? How simple is it for walking the path of your customer, your patient or their family, that onboarding process? Can we take what is maybe a 7, 8, 9 step? Can we reduce it down to a 4-step process? We all know the frustration with any healthcare organization where we get transferred and we have to enter our information again and again because they're not connected. So that's part of that mindset of that Are we simplifying? Are we expediting so that the process isn't frustrating so that we can get to the treatment, which is why we were there in the first place?
What's coming up for me as you're talking about this is, and you're very right, the review process is critical. But what typically happens is we're always adding more processes or adding more steps. We're never eliminating steps.
Yeah, we all do it.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so we end up with more and more and more. And we're scared to take something away because in that one situation, 1,000, what if we didn't have that thing? It's a really good point. A friend of mine is writing a book, or has written a book recently called Rethinking. And in that book, she talks about the strategic art of subtraction. I think this is kind of where you're going, is what could we have subtracted out of all of that to have made your experience seamless, frictionless, and more enjoyable, frankly?
Well, but let me put it this way. Here's why this is more important than it's ever been, and it is more important than it's ever been.
Yeah.
Is that everybody has a bullhorn, a megaphone that reaches around the world.
Yes,
right?
they do.
In terms of our ability to express our displeasure, we all grew up in business hearing some version, what you used to call this guest relations philosophy, and everybody in business has heard this, and it goes something like this. The average person with a positive experience tells 2 or 3 people, but somebody with a negative experience tells 10, right? We've all heard that before.
Yep.
I will tell you, Dr. Green, none of that is true anymore. Today we tell thousands. Today we tell millions. Today, the ramifications of underperformance, frustrating your patients, being difficult to work with, going through whatever, the ramifications are really tremendous now because they go online and they will share and they will rant. It's not about just, are we providing good experience so they feel happy? Is that those who are unhappy have resources now that can be very damaging to our business. Now, of course, there are some of the worst elements out there that will weaponize that threat and all those kind of things. We know that. But I always say, if they're holding a gun to the practice, don't hand them bullets, right?
Yeah.
It was a terrible American reference with all that's going on. But the point is clear, is that we need to take a step back and walk our own processes. We know why we're doing what we're doing, but if there's something that is mandatory, if it's required as part of the requirements, compliance, are we explaining that up front, right? I mean, the amount of times I was asked if I was happy with my smile, I was there because I had a specific, now I understand, because I've been part of these trainings as well. Everybody's in business, right? The dentists aren't out there performing a public service. We're all in business, right? Okay, this is not intended to be not-for-profit, but it's more than that. It's how is business being done in general? And so, and I want to get away from sort of a complaint in terms of our conversation, is we're learning a lot of really cool things from other industries in terms of how they're communicating or onboarding. How are people finding out information? How are they deciding who to do business with, right? Because most in dental practices, if you can get a prospect into the chair, you've got them, right?
Yeah.
Because you're great at what you do and because your team, I've heard it 1,000 times, we treat our patients like family. I always joke, I see how some of you treat your families. It's not always a good thing. That's a joke. But we know that one behavior that is predictive of success is, can we get somebody in the door and in the chair?
Yeah.
Because then we can really shine as a team, right? So what creates that? What prevents that? And online negative comments or reviews derived from a frustrating experience of others gets in the way of that.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about other industries, because our show is predicated on Not Invented Here, and I know you work across lots of different industries, and I also know you've done a lot of work in dentistry as well. You're the only guest I know who's ever known prosthodontics, orthodontics, and to rattle those off your tongue very easily.
Periodontist, all the
period. Yeah, so let's not forget our periodontist.
But I've worked with all the subspecialties. It's very interesting in my work in customer experience or patient experience. I work across a lot of industries, and I've done a lot of work in dentistry, and every one that I've done sort of leads to the next one. But I have a great appreciation for a really unique medical practice, right? Because I came from my background. I was PR director, public relations director of Children's Hospital in Denver, Colorado when I was 26 years old. And so I did a lot of work with hospital-based healthcare. And of course, when we get to community-based healthcare, and I'm sure there's some practitioners that are hospital-based, it's not only being great medically and clinically, but you have to be great in business. And sometimes it's the thing that's not taught so well in medical school is the business side. That's why I think your podcast is such a great service.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words. And you're right, it's not taught at all in dental school. The curriculum's full of all the other clinical qualities.
Crazy.
And even the communication piece is not taught as well. We're focusing on the teeth, not the person, which is a travesty in my mind. But that's probably me getting on my soapbox and ranting. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about macro trends because, again, you've got a lot of experience looking at industries outside of dentistry, whether it be finance, whether it be online retail, whether it be tourism and leisure, whatever it is. What are the macro trends that are shaping customer experience these days that dentists need to be aware of? Because, again, if we're not aware of them, someone else will come in and disrupt dentistry. And dentistry is, I believe, ripe for disruption because it's a high margin business.
I think it's in the midst of it.
It is through the corporatization of dentistry. And
Absolutely.
I think that there'll be others, though. And other than the usual suspects of corporatization, like we spoke a little bit about Smile Direct Club off air, and I know they've had their challenges, but notwithstanding that, that was a disruptive force. And what are the trends that you think the dentists either need to be aware of or indeed incorporate?
Well, and that's the key is, are we going to be, well, let me put it a different way, and then I want to talk about the trends, we talk about disruption, right? Disruption is those outside nefarious forces doing something different that threaten our industry. But when we drive the exact same processes and creativity, that's just called innovation. It's the exact same thing. It's just who's doing it. And so I'm a big advocate of us driving that change as opposed to the complacency that creates an environment for others to come in and do it to us. And then we're scrambling to catch up, or we're trying from a regulatory perspective to get them shut down so they don't. There are things that are really inevitable. And I think they need to be embraced. So we talk macro trends. Macro trends are a couple of things. One is technology. And technology in terms of clinical technology, and then in terms of your interface with your customers and your patients as well. The technology, we're seeing some of that. Much of that we see as a threat, as a disruptive force. And I say we, I'm not a dentist myself, but I work a lot with the industry. And there will be others of that ilk, of the Smile Direct Clubs and others, who will come in and take their place, and there already are. And so there will be, like you see with automotive, right? You can buy a car online and Carvana will come and pick it up and take it away. You don't have to go in and haggle. Every industry is being disrupted in that way. But when you look at it from the perspective of the customer or the patient, it is a great time to be a customer in the world today. The amount of conveniences and options are off the charts. Anything, I live just south of Denver, Colorado. So for your Aussie listeners or viewers, we're about right in the middle of America, a little bit to the left. We have multiple Amazon warehouses within 50 miles of where I live. And 80% of what we order, we get same day.
Wow.
I can order something at 9 o'clock at night and I still get it same day. It is insane. It's ridiculous. And it's awesome. And so part of the macro trends are there's an expectation of immediacy. I ask audiences, especially when I'm working with dentistry and others, I say, how many of you have noticed that your patients and their families are a little more impatient, a little more demanding? And of course, everybody gives me that look like, welcome to my life. Well, and it's only going to increase because others make it easy. So some of the macro trends is sort of the technology in terms of communication. We want some visibility into the process. So if we're working with a prosthodontist, if we're working with orthodontics, even when it comes to an Invisalign or something like that, we want to know, when is something going to arrive? Where is it in the process without having to call to ask? One of the other macro trends we're seeing across all industries is the ability, as you and I are doing right now, for that face-to-face communication. Dentistry has been lagging in this because there's always this thought, we need to see them in the chair. And you're going to see this very soon, not 5 years. There is and will be an expectation that we can do virtual visits. It may not be an examination, but it also might be. My wife, I had an earache from a recent flight, and my wife last night grabbed this little device with a light on the end, plugged into her iPhone, and said, stick it in your ear. And a little endoscope, consumer product from Amazon. How soon before we get a thing that we're opening our mouth and they're sending us a device and we do it, and somebody is in China, somebody's somewhere else doing that exam. Doesn't mean they can do everything. And for those of you listening or watching, do not dismiss this. because it'll be a part of what you do. The macro trend is that immediate access, the immediate conversation. How do we do that? And then also from a marketing perspective, this is sort of a profound change, is when we promote our practice, we're always talking about our quality, commitment, caring, trust. It's about the people.
Yeah.
Okay, fair, but certainly not a differentiator. Quality is expected. I went out and I did some work with a prosthodontic practice out on the East Coast, actually in Princeton, New Jersey, in America. And they saw me speak at a big global dental implant academy event. And they brought me in to work with their team. And I said, what's your big issue? And they did very high-end implants, right?
Yep.
And they said, the problem is we're hearing from people all the time, nobody cares about quality. They only care about price. And I said, that's not true. And they said, oh, no, it is. I said, well, I promise you it's not, but tell me why you believe that. And they said, because we get calls all day long. They just want to know the price.
Yeah.
And I just smiled. I said, here's what you're not realizing is the selection process has been going on. You just didn't know it. And you made it down to the end. You're a finalist. And when that prospect didn't see a difference because you say the same things about yourself online, then it just came down to price because everybody was qualified. They assume quality. Don't ever think they don't care about it. They just assume, right? Everybody passed the tests or the tests. And so now another macro trend is that there is a broad perception of quality. And so now we're looking for where's the real differentiators that we can use to build our business. And that's what I talk about.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. This is a pet topic of mine. The other thing about quality is patients can't judge quality. Genuinely, they can't judge the quality of your dentistry. They know how you made them feel, but they can't tell whether your crown margins are perfect or not. They can tell if the tooth is sensitive. They just can't tell. And so they use proxies to determine quality. What's really interesting is it's a bit like going different places and trying to assess quality of how well my mechanic repairs my car. I've got no idea, but I can tell you if the car knocks afterwards, I'm assuming it's not so good. Or if it's uneventful, I'm assuming it all went smoothly. So what's really interesting about that is patients are notoriously unreliable when it comes to quality determination in dentistry. Sure. You can't talk about others. And the other thing, you're right, it is so true that when someone rings up and asks how much is up, blah, blah, whatever it is, I mean, that's a buying signal if ever there was one. I mean, that is
You're already at the end of the process.
Totally.
And you are a finalist. That's good news.
Yeah, it's good news, but you're right. They've also missed an opportunity to differentiate themselves further upstream. And so I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about that. I have lots of thoughts on this, and we're doing lots of work with our clients on this. I'm very keen to get your perspective on what the upstream opportunity is.
The upstream opportunity, and it's upstream, it's on the stream, it's downstream as well, is pay attention to the things that matter to your patients. And we'll use patient and substitution for customer.
Yeah.
Once again, there's assumption of quality. Your tooth is going to hurt before or after or not. But the things that we can really control that are important to them is flexibility of schedule, right? Simplicity of that process. How easy is the onboarding? All of those things that help us get to what we want. This is the whole thing in marketing, and I've written books on marketing as well, about we're selling outcomes. They're coming to you not for a filling, they're coming to you for the alleviation of pain, right?
Yeah, not smile or whatever.
Yeah, right. They're not coming to you for veneers. Yeah. They're coming to you to feel better about themselves or to launch their new life post-divorce or whatever those things might be, right?
Well, let me tell you, David, no one has ever said to me, Jesse, I'm so happy to be here for my root canal therapy. No one ever says that. Or my crown or whatever. No one says that. Yeah, and ask for a procedure. They really want the outcome. The
absolutely.
The means to get it.
And so oftentimes what's really important, and this is the whole thing, like Simon Sinek talks about that, they have to know your why. And I don't agree. I think he's awesome. I think you have to know their why.
Yeah.
You have to know why they're there, and they're not there for, it's the old adage, and you might have heard this before, when somebody goes to a hardware store to buy a drill, they don't need a drill. What do they need?
Hole.
They need a hole.
Well, right? They need a hole to put a hook, whatever.
They need a hole, and the drill is the best tool to get them there, right? So when they're coming in, they want health, they want aesthetics, they want all those things on the other side. The easier and faster we can get them to what they want, right? Without sacrificing clinical quality, without making our team crazy because we have to have some systems in place. But that's what we call customer centricity. We have historically been, as a society, what we call product centric. And product centric means we're very good at what we do and we sell it to as many people as we can, right? That creates market share. And that's the way business has been done for thousands of years. The problem is when everybody's good, then your customers or your prospects don't know the difference and they're looking for price or proximity.
Yeah.
The opportunity now is we're seeing businesses go from product centric to customer centric. And customer centric doesn't mean we're customer focused, right? Everybody said, for us, it's about the patient. We know that, everybody is. We don't take our eye off the ball. The quality is high, we keep it high. We want to really dig into what's important to our patients and their families, not just in terms of clinical outcomes, but even in terms of the process. Think about that single mom or that single dad, and they get home and the kids are hungry and they got to get their homework done, and I can't take off work early. And do we have one night a week that we're working till 9? Do we have one Saturday that we're working till noon to be flexible for that? Is there a way that I don't need to come in and get in the chair? I can do something on a virtual visit by saying, I'm still feeling a little bit of this. Can we extend the antibiotics or whatever that might be? Of recognizing what's important, what's going on in the lives of your patients and their families. And the more we can align with that, people feel it. And that's what we say, what's your competitive advantage? It's the relationship. We have this great relationship. Relationship isn't an attraction tool for your practice. It's a retention tool. And you build the relationship by not just keeping your promises and being good at what you do. It's by really making their lives better. I was keynoting a conference, and right before I went on, the CEO was on stage. He was doing the rah-rah speech for the company. About 250 people in the audience. And he says at the very end, he says, and remember, at the end of the day, it's about quality. We will win on quality. And everybody cheered. And I thought, I could not disagree more. At the end of the day, it's not about quality. Everybody listening, watching, at the end of it, it's not. At the beginning of the day, it's about quality. Quality is the entry fee. You have to be good or the marketplace will figure it out. That's what it costs to be in business. But at the end of the day, it's about competitive advantage. It's not what do you do well. It's what do you do better than others who do it well. And for me, I'm all in on the patient experience, not just what it's like in the chair, not just because they're looking at a TV screen or pictures of puppies on the ceiling. It's the communication. It's the onboarding. It's the options. My God, give us options. Give us communication options.
Yeah. There's so much I want to talk to you about.
Sorry, and I get on a big rant, but
No, you go for it, mate.
I'm such a champion of business.
You are, and I love that. And I think the dentists need to hear this as much as anyone. Over your shoulder, you've got a plethora of books that you've written. And obviously, we've been talking about being ridiculously easy to do business with. But on your bookcase behind you, there's another book you've written called Why Customers Leave. And so I want to juxtapose that thought with being ridiculously easy to do business with, because I think sometimes one thought process might lead to the other. And tell me then, is the corollary then that people leave the business because it's just too hard, or is there something more to it than that?
Well, it's probably even a little more simple. They often leave because they can, just because we have choices. And even something that we think is pretty minor, if they're, and we think of it like a restaurant. If you go to a restaurant, it doesn't have to be a bad experience. If it was just fine. The next time you go out, you got so many choices of places to eat. Don't go to a place that's fine. You go to a place that might be great. And of course, then we look online. The reviews are always really important because we don't want to make a mistake. But people leave because they can. And then going a little bit deeper, they leave because they're not getting what they want the way they want it and when they want it. And I know it makes people sound really spoiled, but we have choices for who we're going to give our money to and who we're going to do business with. And the ones that really align with us, think about, here's a weird analogy. I don't think I've ever used this before. Think about just the church in general, right? And how many different divisions within, whether the Catholics and the Protestants and the Methodists and the Lutherans, it's all the same book. But people will gravitate towards the ones that feel like them. Some people want a little more structure and ceremony. Some people want a little more or a little less rigid or whatever. And people will find and gravitate to a way to worship or to do business with the way that feels good for them. If they feel like that the business was accommodating or convenient. I mean, half the time, the primary driver is proximity. Right? Is it close to your work or is it close to home? I mean, even from a marketing perspective, we've got to recognize, unless you were a subspecialist, convenience is a huge driver. All the new research, there's a lot of research in the last few years. Some of my colleagues have done great research, Jay Baer and Shep Hyken and others as well. In almost every one of them, speed comes up as the number one driver.
Yeah.
Once again, we assume quality, speed of response, speed of answer, speed of issue resolution, whatever that might be. Number two is convenience. And the opposite of convenient is inconvenient. If it's inconvenient, right, I don't have to be furious with you to go seek an alternative. It was a pain in the backside, so I'll go somewhere else. And so even at the most basic level, and in the book, I list probably 24 different specific things. Are we over-surveying, right? Are we making people go through an arduous process that we should be filling things out, but somebody created some system that we put the work on the patient to do the work because it's too much for it. I mean, if you're making things easier on your team and in turn you're making it more difficult on your patients, rethink that.
Yeah.
So there's a variety of reasons, but it really comes to that, is that people will often leave for petty reasons, but reasons are reasons.
Reasons are reasons, yeah. So David, interestingly enough, we've spoken about disruption, we've spoken about the macro trends that are changing the way that we all do business and how some of those trends may impact industry. I'm curious to ask the other directional question is, what do you think other businesses could learn from dentists?
Boy, what a great question. I wish I'd known it before. I would have put some great thought into it.
Sorry, question of that.
No, I think probably the biggest lesson, and sometimes maybe to a lesser extent, we might say financial services professionals as well, is there are very few professions or industries that have been so successful at multi-generational retention. Dentistry is one of those. And that comes from a lifetime of trust. I mean, even within the medical category, just traditional doctors, we graduate from the pediatrics to the adolescents and often to geriatrics at some point. And they're generally different practitioners along the line. But I went to the same dentist that my parents went to. And they, by the time I had kids, they had retired, but I would have trusted them with everything. I think dentistry does a phenomenal job. That's why I said before, is that once you get that person in the chair, so all the things that are online that would make a decision, the things that we're doing to try and get that one, get them into the office that first time, make it super easy for the onboarding. Once you get them in that chair, in most cases, unless you're talking about something very expensive and you're competing for some full mouth implants, you've got them not only as a patient, but you got their family. And you've got them multi-generational. And we know the lifetime value of a patient and their families. That's why that level of accommodation, of flexibility, of choices is so important, because it's not just what are we losing in that particular filling or crown, it's a lifetime value. So anyway, so there's my quick answer. I think dentistry, I can't think of another industry that is so good at creating multi-generational loyalty.
No, thank you for that. I think that's really interesting. And again, it's a pet topic of mine as well. But what
I'm curious, what's your answer to that?
So it's really interesting. I asked one of our previous guests, who is a dentist who became a barrister. His name is Brad Wright, a really lovely guy. And I said to Brad, so what do you think your legal colleagues could learn from dentists? And his response was time management. And in the sense of, from a day-to-day basis, dentists are very structured with their time. We run a very tight schedule, as you can appreciate. But he felt that the legal profession were a little looser with their time management and leaked opportunities. But I think you're right. I do think that the long-term customer retention, longevity is really interesting. And that's a topic that I'm fascinated with and have been fascinated with forever in lots of different industries. So much so that a friend of mine told me yesterday, enough already, Jesse, enough. I've had it up to the back teeth with you talking about retention. But I do think there's a huge amount of truth in what you're saying. And I guess what's going through my mind as I'm processing the conversation is, for our audience here, is to really understand that once you've got them in that chair, once you've crossed that threshold, you have a major opportunity, as David said, to keep them for years, for generations, multiple six figures of income coming off that. So then you're going to need to understand what are the things that contribute to getting people into the chair, make it easy, simple, and smooth, and then what are the detractors, and remove any amount of friction.
Absolutely. Well, and I don't mean to suggest that the work is done, and from then on, it's just quality clinical practices. We're learning, and this is where the disruptors are coming in, that there are ways of simplifying and expediting And if
Yeah.
you are in, the biggest challenge we have within dentistry is, quite frankly, older practitioners who don't want to make the change or the investment, or they'll do it for the younger doctors taking over their practice or things like that. But once again, that kind of complacency opens the door for disruption. I mean, I think
Yeah.
probably the most present disruption, of course, as you had alluded to before, was the corporate dentistry and sort of buying up the practices. But there's other forces.
Absolutely.
The Smile Direct Clubs, or the Smile Set, I think, took them over, and some others. And there will be others
Yeah,
who
well,
will come as well, who would love to take your longtime patient and convert them into their first time patient.
100%.
They're advertising, and that information is online, and they're communicating. I say this, I do a lot of work with residential real estate as well. And I tell them, we're being told all the time that we don't need you. We don't need to pay your commission. You better fight for this profession. I don't think dentistry is in that place. I think dentistry has some phenomenal opportunities to adopt and monetize some of the things that the external forces are imposing upon you. Beat them at their own game.
Yeah, 100%. So, ladies and gents, a couple of key takeaway messages. One is never take your customers or your patients for granted, because they have options, they have choices. And so even though you get them in the chair the first time, you've got to earn the next visit every single time. And the second one is complacency kills. So let's make sure that we're across all the different macro trends. Let's look at the things that we can do to simplify, streamline. Let's look at the new opportunities and embrace them ourselves, rather than having someone else embrace them and have someone cut our lunch, as they say here in Australia. David, I don't know if that's an expression that translates to America, but
Not, but I get what you mean. I think you make a really good point when you talk about the sort of the complacency as well, but it can take different forms.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just a negative that we've stopped trying. I think sometimes practitioners, especially in dentistry, will delude themselves into saying our patients love us. We treat them like family, and that's enough. And it's not enough. It's important. Don't stop treating people. You probably have a phenomenal team. I always ask when I'm speaking for like a study club in America or sometimes abroad, I always tell them for mine, make it like a recruitment event. Invite all staff. Make it an all staff event, because everybody has such an important role. And we can't get so cocky that our patients love us. Good, they should. And you probably do have great people, and you probably do treat them like family. Now, walk your patient's journey. What are we learning from other industries? What are some of the great innovations even within dentistry? I have an exercise that I do when I speak to groups, and I do within dentistry as well. And I say, imagine you left your practice. And I said, I'm never suggesting that you do, but if you open a competing practice 6 months later, you're fully funded, but you get to start from scratch. Everything that you learned, what would you do differently?
Oh, yeah, I love that.
Right? This is sort of that wave. If your patients could wave a magic wand, what would they have you do differently? And some really interesting things have come up. We're seeing practices that are adding esthetician services as well.
Yeah.
Facial or even relaxation, massage, kind of. What are other things that we can offer? I don't say sell them, but offer up while they're there. What can they do while they're waiting for their whitening? What are the other kinds of things so it's not just something that we dread, right? Because the complacency isn't just about taking them for granted. It's taking for granted that what you're doing now is enough. Ooh, that's pretty good. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, there's a whole lot in there, David. Really interesting thoughts. I've just had a mental blank.
Yeah, that's all right. I'll do what I'm thinking. But we're talking about the things that we do well. We hold that. We kind of ride that we're really good. We have these phenomenal relationships with our patients. All that's important. What sometimes you fail to recognize is that your patients are changing.
Yeah.
And their expectations are changing. Not just the quality, and they love the relationship, but their expectations for ease and speed. And what's the new fangled something? What's a new way of straightening my teeth or whitening my teeth? I mean, because we're seeing it. We're all customers, right? We're seeing what's new. We're seeing the new ads and everything else. And so it's being hungry and knowing that somebody's always nipping at our heels.
My thought bubble has come back to me.
I figured it would.
Yeah. Okay. So the word family is a really interesting word, and it's a word that gets thrown around a lot in dentistry. We treat our patients like our family. We treat our team like our family. Recently, I was interested to read the Netflix culture document, and I don't know if you had the opportunity to read that. And it's a really interesting read, and they're talking about it from the team culture point of view. But I'll see your thoughts about this in a moment, because family is a word that brings up lots of feelings of warmth, closeness, etc. for most people. For others,
Sure.
for others, they'll bring up different thoughts. But Netflix made a point in their culture document saying we don't believe in treating our team like a family. We believe in treating our team like a high-performance team. And if you're going to be on our team, you've got to perform very well, and it's a competitive selection process. And in essence, they said, lovely people who don't perform get a generous severance package. We love them, and we want the best for them, but they don't have a role.
Yeah.
We invite them to leave. Now, I'm not suggesting we do that with our customers and patients, but I wanted to talk about the word family and whether that's an appropriate word these days, because maybe customers' expectations have evolved and changed where, candidly, we get away with a lot of slack from family members. Mum and dad will forgive a lot of stuff. Brothers and sisters will forgive a lot of stuff. Kids will forgive a lot of stuff. Patients and customers may not. And so I wanted to talk about, is family the right word these days, or should we actually call them what they are, customers?
Here's my response is there's a different conversation for our internal culture and conversation and a different one for external in our marketing. But you have to give credit for where this is coming from. And it's coming from a place of saying, and probably there's no industry that does this better or more common than with senior care.
Yes.
So I'm one of those that when both of my parents have passed, but we were that generation that was taking care of my father. My mom died unexpectedly. My father, we were looking for a memory care center. And I could recite the script because everybody said the same thing. But they used family in a different way that was probably a little more descriptive, which was we treat our residents as if they were our own parents.
Yeah.
And so that for us, because that comes directly from that feedback, which was, I need somebody to care about my dad the way I care. And I don't expect that they will, but I want them to try because I love this man.
Yeah.
And it's not even the part when he was towards the end and they were going, are you okay? And I took somebody out in the hallway and I said, please don't talk to him like a child. He's one of the smartest, he was a rocket scientist and one of the smartest men on the planet, right? But the whole idea that we are going to treat them as if they were part of our family, I think is very well intended. Would I say we need to throw it out? Not really. I think from an internal perspective, from an external perspective, I think the family word works well. But it's not just treat them like family, but treat them as if they were our own. This is how we would treat someone in our family. Internally, I think the conversation's much more aligned with what you said about customers, which is do our people understand how we make money? Does our team understand the lifetime value of a patient and their family? Because this feeds our family. This pays the bills. And so that interaction where you had to just swallow your tongue because you wanted to go off on somebody and somebody was being irresponsible. Well, we're asking everybody in our team to do one Saturday morning and one evening a month. And we're all going to trade off because this is important to our customers. And so customer, patient, whatever that might be. But I'm a big fan of pulling back the curtain a little bit to show our team how we make money so they understand the importance of all those interactions. Sir Richard Branson had a very famous line, which was, it's very simple that if you treat your employees well, they'll treat your customers well. And I don't agree with that. I think it's important to treat our customers well. I think they treat our customers well when they understand how important our customers are to our business, to our livelihood. And I think part of leadership is helping them understand, here's how we make money and how important our happy customers are to our own livelihood so we can support our families.
Happy patients who pay, stay and refer, mate. That's what we're after. David,
Absolutely.
You've been incredibly generous with your time today, mate. I'm very mindful of the time today as well. Ladies and gents, if you want to grab a copy of any of David's books, please head across to Amazon, but particularly get a copy of Ridiculously Easy to Do Business With. It will be a practical guide that's going to give you the step-by-step and how to achieve the things that we've spoken about. So please go ahead and do that. Think about the trends. Think about how to make your customers or your patients' lives easier, simpler, faster, more convenient, and that'll come back and serve you very well indeed. David, you've been a scholar and a gentleman. You come out to Australia a fair bit. I believe you can.
I do. Actually, we were out there. We just launched the new book, Ridiculously Easy to Do Business With, in Australia. So that's pretty exciting as well. And I'm going to be a couple of times this spring. And I know that this podcast is a little bit evergreen so that people do. But yeah, I come on a regular basis. If you want to learn more about me, anybody can just go to my website. It's just my name, davidavrin.com.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'd really encourage you to do that because there's a whole bunch of wonderful resources on David's website, in addition to the books as well. So please go check it all out, davidavrin.com. And of course, if you happen to see David out here in Australia, go and see him speak because it'll be worth your while. And
or bring me in to speak. Happy to do that as well. A lot with dentistry. All right, mate. This was terrific. What a great opportunity to have a conversation. Let's reconnect at some point.
Thank you very much, David. Have a good day, mate.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, it's Jesse here. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the podcast. If you're looking for some more tools, some more insights, some more inspiration to help you create a practice that you love, as well as a life that you love, well, head across to savvydentist.com and check out all the goodies that we have there waiting for you right now.